Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whatever time it is you're watching, and welcome back once again to another episode of the Harbor Trust Financial Podcast. My name is Shane, and I'm joined here, as always, with my co-host Phil. And today we're going to be getting into a topic that we do very often with our clients. The way that we usually introduce this topic with our clients is a concept called, well, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to introduce it that way. We just had our first snow yesterday. It's November. It's getting cold. Christmas is around the corner. And Phil, I thought of a Christmas gift I wanted to get for you, and I'll spoil it here on the podcast
What's
early.
that?
I'm not even going to get into the concept of talking with my clients. I want to get you something. You're a finance guy, are you not? You like money, don't you?
Yeah, I
you like
do.
working with money, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I got this idea where I know a guy who knows a guy who could get me a money printer. So I was thinking of wrapping that up all nice and putting that under the tree for you this year.
A money-making
A
machine.
money-making machine, pretty much, a money printer. I put that in the living room. I'll kind of maybe paint it, make it look all nice, and you just blend right in with your decor and have a money printer, do whatever you want with it. So what do you think about that?
I'd love that.
Yeah, that'd be a great Christmas gift.
I think everybody would.
I think
love
everybody
that.
would like that gift for whatever holiday you celebrate. A money-making machine's a great thing. But here's a catch. Well, it's not a catch, more of a question. Would you insure it if I got you a money-making machine? Would you insure it?
Why would I insure it?
Well, I mean, if it stops working.
Yes, I would.
If it stops printing one morning, I would like to insure it. If it makes, I don't know, if it prints out $4,000 a month, would you put $100 aside for it to make sure it keeps printing out $4,000 a month in the event that it stops? You tell me. You know what I mean?
That would make sense.
Why don't you put yourself in those shoes, listener, and why don't you ask yourself that question? Would you do that as well? I mean, I don't think I can come up with a reason why you wouldn't. So that's the topic we're talking about today is why would we insure the money-making machine, which is you. You are the money-making machine, right? I'm not getting you any Christmas gifts is what I'm getting to here.
No.
You're not getting nothing for Christmas. No, but, everybody works. Everybody makes income. You are, in that sense, you are the money-making machine. You are the money printer because you are doing what that printer does. You're racking up thousands of dollars per month to support yourself, maybe to support your family, to support your goals, to support your projects. And there is a possibility that you lose the ability to do that. Hence, you end up in a disability to work. Disability insurance is what we're going to be talking about today. So on that note, Phil, can you kind of enlighten us? What is disability insurance? What is a disability?
Well, there's two types of disability.
Right.
Okay. You could be disabled due to an illness.
Right.
Or you can be disabled due to an accident.
Right.
Okay. And the purpose of having disability coverage in place is to replace that loss of income.
Right.
Because we know that we're not going to get 100% of our pay if ever we become ill or we have an accident.
Correct.
And by having that disability as well in place, will give you a sense of security, that financial security.
Absolutely.
To cover yourself from that event of having a disability, either on the illness side or the accident side.
Okay, so when we're talking about like disability, illness, or accidents, the first thing that we hear when we mention this topic with clients, I have this at work, and that will typically unpack quite a chunk of questions following up that. So I have it at work. I have disability insurance at work. I want to make sure that people understand here. The point of this episode today is to make sure that everybody understands what it is that we're going to ask you if you tell us you have disability insurance at work. We're not going to ask you questions because with any other motive or any other goal than to make sure that you understand what you have and that it's actually adequate to protect you. And these are the questions that we're going to typically ask, which is fun. You'll be able to ask yourself here today while listening to this podcast. We'll kind of give you some tips and tricks on how to find these things out, but we're going to enlighten you on everything that involves disability. There's different types of disability insurances. So if you have disability at work, it's not this say-all, end-all, answer to a question. Oh, I have it at work, I'm good. What is it that you have at work? What is your disability? What kind of disability? How long does it cover you for? What does it pay? What percentage of your salary? So on and so forth. So types of disability insurance, we'll start there. Short and long term?
Correct.
So kind of take us into that path.
Short term, it'll be predetermined. Either you have, depending on the waiting period,
Right.
or even the eligibility. So two things in the short term. If we start with the eligibility, are you a full-time employee or you're a part-time employee?
Okay.
Generally speaking, somebody who are part-time don't necessarily have access to the types of disability that the work will offer.
Right.
Okay. If you are a full-time, is there a waiting period before even the disability kicks in? Or does your group plan kicks in from day one?
Right.
Very important to know.
Day one of like a disability occurring, you're talking about.
Day one from starting your work as well, because let's say you're within that probation period of your work.
Right. So they don't always cover when you're in that period.
No.
What is that period?
Generally, it's 3 months.
Okay.
And after 3 months, you should be covered. But then after that, once your disability kicks in with your group plan, that you're eligible now, you've passed that grace period, there still could be some waiting period. So when we're talking about the short term, is it immediate? Is it a few days? Or is it 30 days?
Gotcha.
Or do you even have short-term disability? So many times we'll sit down with clients and they'll say, I have disability coverage, I'm good. And we start looking in their group plan and all of a sudden there's a lot of surprises.
Yeah.
I did not know I had no short-term disability. I did not know I only have long-term disability. I did not know I only had short-term but no long-term. I thought I had disability. I did not know there was only X amount of coverage covers my types of my
Yeah,
salary.
what portion of your salary is covered, right?
So there's a lot of those things. So when we look at our short-term disability, we look at the waiting period, or even if we have any short-term disability.
Okay.
The second portion of it is the long-term disability. Long-term disability will kick in after the short-term disability, if any. Generally, we're going to look at long-term. If you have no short-term, I've seen some plans that their long-term starts at 30 days. Some are going to start at 60 days. Some will start at 90 days. Some will start even 6 months.
Like 180 days.
180 days without pay if they don't have any short-term disability.
So then it comes the question of like, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Client, are you aware that if you have some form of an illness or disability or accident that prevents you from going to work tomorrow, are you aware that for the next 6 months you will be incomeless? You will have no income. Are you aware of that, right? That's a far fetch from the first answer you gave me of like, oh, I got it at work, I'm good.
Right.
Okay, do you know that you have 6 months of not getting any income if something happens to you tomorrow? Probably not, right? So flying by the edge of your seat and not being aware of those details, I think can be very, very detrimental to how the scenario plays out, given if it happens, right? The point is we hope it doesn't, but it happens far too often that people are unaware of these things. So that's why we're here talking about it today.
But let's bring back to your first day of employment, right? We all remember, let's say some job or some employment that we have spent our first day or first week.
Super excited.
Yeah,
super pumped.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on.
There's new lot people to take in.
New people you meet. Maybe some new system you need to adapt yourself to.
Right.
Let's say it's a brand new industry. Lots of paperwork to fill out.
Yeah.
Sign here, sign there.
Yeah.
Go at the bottom. We don't have time. Let's go.
Yeah.
Everything is rush. We need to learn. We need to do, because at the end of the day, that workplace needs you to start working in order for them to start producing money, so then they can pay you at the end of the day, exchanging time for that money. So a lot of time that HR stuff or that group plan stuff is being put in on the back burner, and then we never look at it again. And then the only time we're going to bring that up, most of the time, not because there's some people that will take a look at it, but majority of the time when we bring back those benefits is when something happens.
It's too late, right?
It's too late.
It's because if something already happened, right? I know some people who had this misconception. Human nature, but I know some people that had this misconception of like, if something happens to, well, it's all right, I'll figure it out when it happens. That's not how it works, man. That's not how you can handle it. Because if something already happens, it's too late to adjust, because the event already happened. In insurance, you're insuring something that could happen. when you're talking about living benefits. You're not insuring something that already happened. That's not how it works. So just kind of saying, well, I know I got something at work, and if I need more, I'll take. Like I've had this answer. Like if well, whatever. If it's not enough, I'll just take out more when I'm on disability. That's not how it works. You can't do that. When you're already on disability, you can't take out more because you're on disability. You're uninsurable for that product, and you're, like, no longer insurable for that period. So that's it. What you have is what you have. Figure it out now, or figure it out when it's too late and you can't do anything about it. Right?
Yeah. And I think it's better to know what you have and what you don't
Oh,
have.
geez.
And then something happens, you could adjust.
For sure.
Versus not knowing what you don't have and then trying to struggle, be like, I did not know, what do we do? Because there's some people out there that don't know how their plan works. And there are some people out there that do get hurt or sick and they can't work.
Happens every day across the country.
Right? So it may not be you, but you might know someone who that happened. Personally, it happened with us in our family. So for me, disability hits home a little more than maybe some people that never experienced one for themselves, because we've been through it. But
you felt the impact of that.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And luckily we were prepared for it. Not necessarily getting, we didn't have disability in place, but the income that we had put aside was able to sustain the family.
Right.
So it's not about always to go get that disability or needing that disability. It's more of, are you prepared financially if there's an impact? And if the answer is yes, with either a big emergency fund or some income coming in while you're being
good
disabled,
policy,
whatever, how it is, because some people don't have an emergency fund, but also don't have a disability.
Right.
So if something happens, they're literally screwed.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but I'll talk about later, but the stress, financial stress. So not only you're trying to get better because you're ill or you're hurt,
trying to recover, right.
and then you're stressing because there's no income coming in.
It's most certainly not double whammy. It's not going to help your recovery, that's for sure.
No, it's gonna enhance the illness.
If anything, it'll slow you down.
Yeah, big time.
That stress isn't going to help anyone.
It's not really good. So
we're talking about work insurance here, and another just fun fact before we move on to more like government programs here, because there are some. There's a lot of things with the government as well that can kind of kick in when you end up in this situation, but we'll get into that. We're talking about work insurance. I'm just going to leave this here and we'll move on. You don't own your work insurance. Listeners, me, you, nobody, if you have insurance at work, you're not the owner of that. You don't own that policy. You don't get to pick and choose what happens with it. So if you say that, yeah, I got disability insurance, I'm good, and you've been at your employer for more than 1 year, that means something could have changed. Every single year, group benefits are renewed. The employer can make changes on those group benefits. And sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of times, employees are not made aware of those changes or just don't understand them. And you just like, yeah, I got my disability insurance when I started. And then it's like 10 years later. It's like, when's the last time have you looked at this? Because it changed 10 times. It could have changed 10 times, and you could still not have it. I had a client who told me that they were covered for like 90% of their income until retirement if something happened to them, and they hadn't looked at their disability policy. And that's what they had. They reassured me. I know, because that's what I read when I signed up 5 years ago. And then 5 years later, we open up the books again, and I take a look at them with the client, and we see that it's actually now 55% of their income for 6 months. The employer made cuts on disability. It's the most expensive part typically one of the most expensive parts of group insurance. So it's usually the first place to get cut if things get too expensive for the employer. And they got cut. So that client going from, I know I'm covered for 90% of my income until retirement, to if something happens to me, I'm getting half of my money taxable for 6 months. It's two different worlds. And that would have been a really tragic surprise if they would have found out after something happened, thinking that they were adequately protected, as they were when they first signed up, right? So keep that in mind. If you have group benefits, yeah, it's great. Keep an eye on that year to year, because what you have this year might not be what you have next year.
Correct.
And don't find that out when it's too late. So that's, and we can move on to other portions because EI is a thing.
Yep.
Workers' comp is a thing.
Yes.
How do those work?
EI, generally, you'll get 55% of your gross annual income.
Okay.
Or your weekly earnings for a maximum of 119 days.
So 55% of what I'm making a week for 119 days.
Yes.
Okay.
And you'll be taxed on that. It's not tax.
That's also taxable.
Yeah.
So after
It's a
taxes, I'm
government
looking at
program.
probably like 40% of what I'm making,
Yeah,
depending on your tax bracket.
bracket you are, but you could look with your CRA, but you take your tax bracket where you're filing your income tax, whether you're at 37%, you're at 30%, you're whichever percentage you're on, then you'll get taxed at the 55% of your weekly earnings. But the good news, there's the workers' compensation, that generally you'll get 65% of your gross, but they calculate on net income. And depending per province, here in New Brunswick, you'll get 90% of your net earnings.
Okay. So net earnings means what I'm paid take home.
Take home.
After taxes, after fees, after deductions, take home pay, 90% of that is what I'm getting.
Yes.
Workers' comp, it has to happen at work.
Correct.
So the disability, the event that triggered you to not be able to work has to have happened at work.
Yes.
Okay.
It needs to be a work event related. It needs to be an injury, unless there's an illness involved, like let's say working with fumes at work,
Like
and
a
then it goes
factory or
into
mines
into the lungs, and they can prove it.
Yeah.
And if it's a long-term effect, it can become a gray area, unfortunately, because there's a lot of stipulations. But
Right.
It needs to be happen at work. Now, another gray area that people need to be careful is if they're driving to work. There's some work that they'll pay. There's some work that won't pay. I've seen both sides of the story from past experience, but it's such a gray area.
Yeah.
But when someone has disability outside of only just their work plan, there's no questions, because that disability pays whether it's at home or work.
Doesn't matter
and it goes
how
on,
or where
on
it
top,
happens.
and it goes on top of it.
Okay.
Unless somebody doesn't abuse of having too much disability, because
You can't enrich in yourself
No.
with disability. It won't work. And if
No.
you try, I promise you will not succeed, because you won't be the first.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't work that way. You can't just take out a disability policy here and then go to another company and take out another one there and then claim all 5 of them.
Because if you get caught, it's
pretty bad.
you'll get
It's not good.
taxed, because now it's earned income, and anyways,
It's money you're gonna get clawed back and pay a bunch of interest and penalties on, and it's just don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not worth it.
But the workers' compensation it has to happen at work.
It has to be work related. Question before we move on from this. EI, you said it was 55% of your weekly earnings.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming 55%. It's pretty low.
Yeah.
If I tell a client, like, hey, I'm going to take away 45% of your income like that, and then I'm going to tax you on the other 55%.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Just a question. Do clients' bills also go down by 45% due to the EI program given by our government?
No, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. You still have to pay the totality of your bills, even though you're getting less than half. Okay, moving on. Just wanted to understand that and make sure that.
Well, a lot of people will say, like, oh, I'll get EI, I'm at work, but what they don't factor in is they've never done a financial needs analysis on themselves.
They don't understand what they're.
Because once someone understands, if they lose 45% of your income,
what does that actually do to you?
When we look at Canadians, unfortunately, and I say very unfortunately, a lot of people are working paycheck to paycheck,
multiple jobs to
and
try to get.
So if you're, and I'm not saying that everybody's that, but if someone's working paycheck to paycheck, and they lose 45%,
they can't lose
income,
20% of their
they
income.
can't lose 5.
That's right. So. And it's you're right. It's an unfortunate reality in today's Canada. Things are very expensive right now. It's hard. It's a bit harder to get by than it's ever been.
But it's not just that. It's to also look at inflation with groceries going up, and everything else going up around us. So even price of houses has been gone up drastically as well, and it makes sense. Economy
Yeah,
has
of
to.
course.
I'm not blaming
We're not pointing
inflation,
fingers, but it's
but you need to be properly prepared with your financial obligation
right. Be
on a
aware of
monthly
that.
basis
Right.
to make sure, hey, let's do the exercise. If I get taken away 45% of my earnings, can I meet my financial obligations?
It's a yes or no question, and it's answered in numbers, so there's no opinions involved to
And the
blur
good
the
news is
lines.
when we do a financial needs analysis, which is a very detailed financial needs analysis, and every client gets a report after we're done with it, they get to see exactly the percentage and to the dime on exactly what they need, what they don't need, what they're properly covered, and what they're not properly covered. Also, they get everything. So with our good financial tools that we have, we're able to show these clients exactly.
Provide direct answers
Yep.
to those questions.
Exactly.
Yeah. So moving on, from that, and again, on these topics, we're going to get into a couple of different things. Any questions or anything related to this that you maybe have a situation that you're going through, or somebody, or you're just trying to be proactive and think, okay, what if I do this and this? Feel free to ask us, answer down in the comments, send us an email. We'll be happy to answer the questions and even have a sit down virtually, or if you're in New Brunswick in person. To answer these questions directly. I think it's really important. We don't charge anything to consult for these kinds of things. I mean, we believe that it's important to share this knowledge. This information should be accessible, and you should definitely, take action on this and understand how the situation would play out. For you, it plays out differently for everybody.
Yeah.
It's case by case, but we have the tools that are there to answer your specific scenario.
Everybody should be doing a financial needs analysis at least once in their
At least
life,
one
so
time
they
in your
understand.
lifetime. Yeah.
So they understand. And like you said, doesn't cost anything, but for them just to have knowledge where they're going. It's like doing a checkup. You go to the doctor, go and do a checkup, make sure your health is in
Right.
check. Well, people should do the same thing with
Absolutely.
their finance. And you could do it, they could do it themselves, but we have the right tools to do it. We can help people go into the
Why
right
not
direction.
do it with an expert?
Why not do it? Before we move on to the next point, just an interesting thing I wanted to share. We're talking about workers' compensation. If you're in different provinces than New Brunswick, every province will have a different percentage of protection on the net earnings. In New Brunswick is 90%, Ontario is 85%, I believe Nova Scotia is 85%. We're looking at every province. So it ranges anywhere between 75 to 90% depending on the province. So depending on the province you're listening to, maybe you look on the workers' compensation on how much
This is
percentage.
this is a very easy Google search. So
Yeah.
just kind of understand what
Yeah.
your province does for you in terms of workers' comp. But keep in mind that this has to be work related. So what do we do if it is not work related? We look at individual
Yeah.
disability insurance, and it's essentially what we just talked about for the last 20 minutes. Is that, but individual, which means that you
Yeah.
personally own the policy. You are personally protecting your income at a percentage that you determine, with the benefit period that you determine, with a waiting period that you also determine, with your advisor. You fully customize an insurance policy to fit your needs after having conducted a needs analysis, of course, to understand what the best case scenario is for your protection. And typically you're replacing 60 to 85% of your income. And we're talking about individual disability policies. These pay you whether your disability happened at work or not.
Correct.
Doesn't matter the source or how it happened or where it happened, as long as it is something that prevents you from working due to an illness or a health issue that was, given to you, written up by a doctor, and says that you can't work for the next X amount of time. Individual disability insurance is what we plan with to set that up for you to make sure that you're covered no matter where or what happens. It's typically the best case scenario. It's the best route to take. You own the policy. There's even sometimes some options. I hate the idea of paying for insurance and not using it, but I also hate the idea of needing to claim a disability insurance, because that's probably because not really a good situation. But better to have it than not have it. But what happens if I don't use it? Well, when you plan with individual insurance policies, there's some options sometimes where you can get reimbursements on your premiums. When you terminate your policy, when you don't need it anymore, you can get reimbursed a certain amount.
Return of premium.
Return of premium. So there's lots of interesting points in individual planning, which is a bit more of our line of work. We usually do this to complement what you have at work, because typically what you have at work is not enough. It is sometimes, we see it sometimes with, maybe better plans, federal government plans sometimes are a bit more beefy and they cover a bigger depth of income, but a higher percentage. But typically, for smaller companies or we're not seeing disability insurances come in and we do our analysis and we go, oh yeah, you're fully fine. It's typically never the case. There's always a little something that can be better. So this is what you use individual disability for, that you go get with a licensed advisor like ourselves.
Even for workers' compensation, if an employee has less than if an employer, has less than 5 employees,
right,
they're not obligated.
They don't
to
need
have
to get any
workers' compensation even.
That's right.
So these are more crucial as well. Those who are in an organization that are only a few people,
like small enterprises, small contractors.
The employer doesn't need to pay for workers' compensation. You need to be over a certain amount of employees.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. And then a second.
That's a good point.
A second point I'd like to bring is, I get a lot of questions. Well, if I get that disability, will it reduce what my work give me, or workers' comp give me, or EI gives me? And the answer is no.
Absolutely not.
Okay, it goes on top of everything. That's why we do a needs analysis, to make sure exactly what you're eligible to get. And also, it's determined per working class as well.
Yeah, depending on what industry, what job you work.
The premium will fluctuate.
Yeah, based on your job.
If you have, I'll go in one extreme to another, but you have somebody in an office that does 95% is just an office, no physical work, versus a miner that goes in Alaska or in Yukon
working
or whatever,
in the mines up there, right?
That's two different employments,
of course,
and one is riskier than the other.
Of course.
So price will fluctuate with that as well. So there's a lot to
take into account.
Definitely.
Yeah. When it comes to that.
So
a lot of people will also ask questions about tax implications when it comes to disability. It's a very simple answer. And I'm going to answer the question directly, but then I'm going to answer it with the concept. If your employer is paying for your disability policy and you have it at work, if your employer is paying for it, you're not paying for it, employer is, it's taxable. Well, the benefit that you're getting is not something you paid for. So it will be taxable. If you are the one paying for it, if it's coming off of your paycheck entirely, not at half, not a portion of it, if the full amount is coming off of your paycheck to cover yourself for disability through your work, then in this case, it is tax-free. The money is not taxable. You don't have to claim income with it. The concept is, like, if you get money that you were not taxed on, you got to pay taxes on it. So if you pay money to have that policy with money that you are already taxed on, well, that's something that you own. You're already taxed on the money you're paying for it with, right? So it's not taxable. So in the sense where your employer is paying for it, it's a source of income that you did not acquire with your own taxed earnings. So you must be taxed on that money. So it's a very simple concept, but make sure that you understand who's paying for your disability insurance, because you could end up with a surprise tax bill at the end of this whole thing. Not knowing that your employer was paying for it, or not knowing that you're paying for it. So understand that as well.
What if it's 50-50?
If it's 50-50, well then, as it goes. Whatever portion it is that you purchased of that policy is not taxable. Whatever portion it is that you have not paid for to acquire that income is taxable, because it's earnings that came from a source that you did not acquire by paying with your taxed earnings. So anything that you're not paying for, it is taxable.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. And then we talk about eligibility and waiting period. So like you mentioned a while ago, it's typically full-time employees. You have to have worked for a specific waiting period. It's typically 3 months that you have to be at your employer working full-time before it kicks in. Sometimes it's immediate, but your most common one is 3 months. Sometimes it goes to 6. Depends on the employer. And then when you're looking at waiting periods for when it pays out, disability happens today. When do I start getting my money? Well, for short term, you can go from a few days up until, about 30 days is typically your whole waiting period to start receiving benefits. But that short-term policy might last anywhere between a few months to maybe a year or two tops.
Short term would be much lower.
Short term is much lower, even at some cases.
3 months under usually.
It's short term is very short. It's not reliable. It's just to kind of get you out of that immediate scenario if you have it. Which a lot of times, if you have long term, as commonly as I see people have short term, I also see people not have it. So there's a pretty long gap of I don't have income, but I still got to pay my bills right there. So then what do? Well, we plan adequately around other things. But then your long-term policies will, they can last up until you retire.
Yep.
I've seen some policies that are in place, and if something happens to you where you can no longer work until you're 65, well, it'll pay you until you're 65, at which time you'll start receiving government pensions anyways. So, but it can also just be a couple years for long-term disability insurance. I've seen it at 2 years. I've seen it at 1 year. I've seen it very, very low, and the waiting period on those is like we mentioned a while ago, anywhere between a month, 2 months, 3 months, goes all the way up to 6 months in some cases. So if it is 6 months and you don't know that your waiting period is 6 months, time to do some planning, time to be proactive, because you got a 6 month period waiting to happen where you're not going to have any income and you're not going to be able to work, and it's not going to be good. So
I remember a case specifically. It was one of your clients. I will always remember because I remember the conversation that this client was telling us that she had disability and she was covered for 2 years at 100%. And in my head, I was like, okay, I kind of went with it, and we'll wait till the financial.
We'll see what we uncover in the analysis.
Yeah, because that was in our first meeting with that client during our market analysis.
Yeah.
And say, okay, kind of let her talk, and didn't want it to argue with the client right there and then after 10 minutes, but we'll find out in the financial needs analysis, and sure enough, she was shocked when it was a 6 months waiting period without no income, and then it was at 65% or
it wasn't even close to the 100% that
no, and she was in shock, and it was only for a certain amount of time. It was for 6 months or a year or something like that. But her reaction was, well, I don't want to say it was priceless, but I was like, I knew this was going to be a shock to her, because everybody who thinks
it's the same reaction. We're used to it by now.
When everybody thinks
it's
that
always
they
a
have
surprise.
I have disability, I'm well covered. It's like, it doesn't mean that you're well covered.
No.
Just be, and I'm not saying everybody should go see a financial advisor. Everybody should go, but just open up your policy. And a lot of people's like, oh, it's complicated, these types of plans. I promise you, they're not. When you open it up, it generally, the writing is bigger in bold. You can't miss it. If you open it up and you look at it, you can't miss it. If it's a complex one, it's a big book or whatever it is, we look at contracts every day.
Do this every day.
So it's easy for us to look at it, and there's a pattern as well to look at certain things as well. So be more than happy to look at it. But just do yourself a favor, and if you have group plans, just open the book, look it up.
Just be aware of what you have.
Don't go to. That's another one. They'll say, "Oh, I went to HR. I'm still waiting for an answer." And I'm not here to blame HR, but a lot of times they have no idea. Some do, but some don't. They have to open up the books, because if there's different departments, and within that company, they might have different departments will have different benefits as well, depending how big your organization. It's not just a one policy for all. Sometimes it's divided per department as well. Yeah. So
if you want to do yourself a favor and talk to a licensed insurance advisor, I think you're putting your odds in your favor.
It's good to go see HR, and I'm not here to diminish HR, but it has happened in the past. People are like, I'm asking HR, and they have no idea. Now they may have some HR worker looking, it's like, but they probably don't know what they're doing. Yeah, just like any other job, right? There's some people who know what they do, and there's some people that don't know what they do. Right.
Fair enough. Which would lead us to our last point here is why...
The peace of mind, the importance.
Why do you do it? It's peace of mind. It's why should you take this seriously? I mean, I think that flying by the edge of your seat is, especially when it comes to this, if you're in your younger years, mid-20s all the way up until pre-retirement, like 45, 50, 55, that whole age range is so crucial to be properly protected. And your income is so detrimental to everything around you. People say money doesn't buy you happiness, but I agree, but it sure solves a lot of problems. It does not buy you happiness, but it does solve a lot of problems, is something that somebody told me at some point. So have the peace of mind of knowing what that result is. Take that stress off your shoulders. Focus on recovering when you're in a disability. Don't focus on the debts and the financial burden that it'll bring on. If you've already prepared yourself for it, there's nothing to worry about. If you haven't, I don't know what there is to worry about, and that is scary. What's more scary, not knowing what there is to worry about, or finding out that your disability insurance is not adequate? Obviously, it's the first. So I mean, it's that's the importance of it. Take it seriously. It doesn't take a lot of time. We do it for free.
Yeah.
We read through this for free, and we do an analysis for free. It's absolutely no obligations. For us, it's in our best interest to find a solution, because that's how we are remunerated. But if there is no solution, if we do find that it's adequate, then even better. Then you've done the due diligence to find out that it's good. You can now have that peace of mind because you were proactive, and we are now friends of yours, and we are there to answer any questions. And we don't just do disability insurance, right? So, but take that seriously on that level, and I think we could wrap it up on that point.
Yeah, and the peace of mind and the recovery.
Absolutely.
Really, those are the two main things. You don't want to be focusing on your finance while you're recovering, or you're stressing out, because stress will bring more to the illness or more to the injury.
Certainly won't help.
On that side, and maybe one question that people should be asking themselves is, you're talking about your income, how important it is for your financial obligation. And here's the question: if you would remove your income, could you meet all your financial obligation on a monthly basis?
If you remove a portion of your income, work backwards. What is the most that you can remove where you'll feel no impact?
But I'm saying this is because there are some people out there that has that either a passive income coming in.
Right, I see what you mean.
Right?
Yeah.
So some people are in the real estate game, that they have apartment building and stuff
rental
like
income.
Rental income. Some people have passive income with their work, if they're in sales and stuff like that. So there might be some other sources of income that comes in that can replace their initial or their main income, that they might be fine. But if you're a type of individual that you don't have that passive income and you don't have a supplementary income, those are the people that is most vulnerable, that needs to look at making sure they're properly covered. Because to your point, if someone gets hurt or sick, and this is not based on fear, because these happens every day, you don't want to be stressing out on money. You want to be more putting that focus on recovery.
Put that energy towards recovery.
Exactly. Because if you put that energy towards stressing about money, guess what? It's going to bring more illness, more injury.
It's not going to help the case.
You're going to be way behind, and then you'll have to do some fundraisers or crowdfunding or what's these types of funding, and I'm all up for that. But when we have the proper planning in place, then
situation usually goes a bit smoother.
Yes,
exactly. A bit is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, at least you'll have some type of income coming in to offset whatever you're losing as well.
For sure. So any questions on top of that, feel free to answer in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Phil and I put a little bit more. I know this one's a bit more dense, a bit longer, but we really allocate a lot of importance towards this topic. It's like you said, you've been through it. I know some people that have been through it as well. And what we do every day is try to prevent these situations, but we can only help people that are proactive enough to take what we say seriously. So hope that you got something out of this episode, and hopefully it makes you a little bit more comfortable with your disability insurance. If you have any, feel free to ask us questions about it. We'll be glad to answer.
Yeah.
On that note, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We will see you next week on the Harbor Trust Financial Podcast. My name is Shane, joined by my co-host today, Phil, as usual. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye-bye, everybody.